The 2020 Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence annual meeting. I'm Inga James. I am the president of the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, and really excited to be able to see some people that I haven't seen for a while. It's always nice. Even if you just have your photo up there, that's nice too. Our program is pretty straightforward this evening. We're going to have a keynote. Ms. Karma Kottman will be speaking to us tonight. And then we will have our awards ceremony. And that is pretty much it. So it's a short and sweet. I hope you have a cocktail or something else appropriate for a cocktail hour. And here we'll go. Thank you so much, Karma, for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. Karma Kottman is the executive director of the Washington, D.C. Domestic Violence Coalition and UJIMA Incorporated, which is a program of the Washington, D.C. network, and is dedicated to Black women and domestic violence and improving their situation. Ms. Kottman has been involved in many national efforts, as well as efforts in Florida, where she worked for the Florida Coalition. I'm really happy and honored to be able to introduce Karma Kottman. Please welcome her.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's so wonderful to see you all. I'm so happy to be here with you. Many thanks to the Maryland Network team. I see a number of different folks who I have worked with over the years at the coalition and now through UJIMA. I wanted to start a little bit by telling, hi, Fiona. And Nikita, I see so many folks. So I wanted to start with you all, tell you a little bit about UJIMA and myself, and then talk to you a bit about the impact of COVID on communities of color, and particularly Black survivors, and what that means for our work right now. So as Inga just said, I am the executive director of both the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence as well as UJIMA, which is the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black community. And our organization focuses on addressing the intersection of domestic violence, sexual assault, and community violence, in particularly the Black community. We serve as the National Resource Center for HHS, addressing these intersections, and have been providing training and technical assistance. We work on policy. So we've been working on the Violence Against Women Act, the Family Violence Prevention Services Act, and other pieces that specifically focus on communities of color. We have a research and evaluation work group, which many of you all know, Dr. Tricia Bent-Goodley and Dr. Johnny Rice, who work with us and lead that research and evaluation work group. And then we also work with other policymakers around the impact and overrepresentation of communities of color in systems, as well as the disparate impact of violence in our community. I'm excited because we have a couple of folks who joined our team. Ayanna Wallace, who was there at the Maryland Network, is on the UJIMA team. We have a specific program that focuses on HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, where we look at these intersections on university campuses as well. So that's a little bit about UJIMA. Me, in terms of where I started my advocacy, I grew up in Washington, D.C. for much of my life, and then also in Prince George's County, where I went to middle school and high school. So between the DMV is where I have worked. But I started my work in Florida at the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence, actually as the rural diversity specialist, if you can believe it, there in Florida. And so the work has really been grounded for me in the reality of what it means to live and grow up in the DMV and see how this work impacts us individually and systemically, and then also working in and understanding the impact of violence against women, and particularly domestic violence and sexual assault in rural communities. And so I had really a sort of broad intersection or entree into this work. And what that really led me to is addressing from a policy perspective and a program perspective, how Black women and other communities of color are impacted by domestic violence and sexual assault, and really our access to resources. And so that's really what I wanted to focus this afternoon on. I am going to quickly share my screen. Oh, well, I can't share my screen, but I'll talk with you all about a little bit about COVID and how it's impacted. But first, I want to kind of define our work. And part of that is because I want to talk about how power and oppression show up in our work on a daily basis. When we talk about domestic violence and sexual assault, what we know is that our work is grounded in addressing systems that disparately impact women, right? And particularly women and girls of color. And so when we talk about the use of power in domestic violence situations, we know that our experiences around domestic violence is centered in how power is used to, one, position people in terms of relationships, but also how power is used to maintain control in the relationships, right? And that understanding that that power is built into systems and built into systems in a form that shows up in terms of oppression. And so when we look at how that shows up in our daily basis, in our daily work, you know, one of the things that we recognize today is how COVID has impacted communities of color. And so when we look at the disproportionate impact of COVID-19, what we understand is that it's also exacerbated the effect of domestic violence and sexual assault in communities of color. That increased isolation resulting from stay-at-home orders has highlighted the unique challenges of addressing domestic violence and sexual assault within communities of color, because we're often marginalized in systemic and in service responses. That women of color are overwhelmingly represented in essential service industries such as restaurant, domestic and janitorial services. And we have a higher vulnerability to sexual assault and ongoing risk to contracting the COVID-19 virus, right? And that the lack of access to safe and affordable housing disparately impacts women of color, survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, who also experience higher rates of homelessness as a result of violence. And finally, that children and youth of color are at an increased risk for victimization and abuse as we continue to be sheltered in unhealthy home environments and have access to reduced access to safe childcare options and social supports. And I'm not saying anything that you don't already know, but for many folks, when we looked at COVID, there was almost an awakening, right? In policy, and around the country as it relates to why is COVID having such an impact on communities of color, right? And for most of us, we already knew because this was our lived realities. We understood that communities of color were living in food deserts, transportation deserts. We knew that communities of color had disparate access to technology. I can't tell you, so I live in Southeast DC, so you all pretty much, many of you will know how we're positioned in the city. And every time I was trying to get on the internet, working from home, I was having challenges. I'm surprised I could even be here without interruption here today with you. And that wasn't happening to all my colleagues across the city. That was happening depending upon where you were living. And so we were even seeing that showing up in children being able to access school, right? And so recognizing that even something as simple as access to technology was different different depending upon where you live. If you live in a rural community, then access to technology is very different from folks who are living in urban and metropolitan cities. And so what we saw as it relates to COVID is the same thing was happening. It was being heightened because not only did we have, this challenges with access to healthcare, folks who were living in substandard housing, but then individuals who had to cope with stay-at-home orders and already were not living in places where they had access to fresh food, right? Had access to transportation, were then disproportionately impacted, but had heightened challenges with just certain things like getting access to their everyday needs, right? And we saw that across the board as communities, but it was something for us as domestic violence advocates, right? We're used to digging in community and helping folks gain access when they don't have it, or addressing systems and figuring out how to work around challenges. But then when COVID happened, what we saw is the general community got, for one moment, a glimpse into what we were experiencing on a daily basis, right? And how we navigate that. For communities of color, though, what we saw is that those longstanding historical challenges then were heightened as it relates to what was and is a public health and economic crisis, right? And so why this is important is because when we talk about words like intersectionality, when we talk about words like vulnerability, when we account for poverty, health disparities, mental health challenges, and access to mental health services, challenges and disparate access to education, the impact of the criminal legal system. When we address those things and when we look at those challenges, what we know is that there is a current culture that almost, in a way, challenges for many of our communities access, right? And that's when we start to talk about why is it important for us to frame out our work in terms of intersectionality? Why is it important for us to think about vulnerability? And why is it important for us to challenge the current culture in order to ensure that the survivors that we serve have access to the very simple things that they need on a daily basis? And in doing so, part of what we have to recognize is that we can't challenge or we can't change what we don't want to acknowledge, right? That in as much as we don't talk about the fact that these things exist, whether we're talking about systems, whether we're talking about access to food, whether we're talking about simple access to internet, if we don't talk about the fact that there is disparate access, then we can't change it, right? And the individuals that we serve don't have access to the very supports that they need. And so when I think about that, I think about, what does 2020 mean, right? If someone had told us in January that we would be here in October, I think that all of us would agree, we would have said, absolutely not. I know I would have been like, absolutely not would I still be working from home trying to figure out how I was going to navigate Zoom in 2020, right? And so this has required all of us to change, right, in some way to figure out how to adapt. And those are the things that we ask of survivors every day. We ask them to figure out how to adapt in order to navigate safety. We ask them to figure out how to adapt in order to gain access to the very resources that they need. And so when we think about what we are experiencing as a country, it's been heightened for survivors, but it's also something that for many of us, for many communities, for survivors, is not unfamiliar territory, right? They already were trying to figure out how to navigate resources, and now these things have been heightened. But I want to take a moment to say one thing, and it's something that I say to policymakers on a regular basis, and that is that you all, as providers, as advocates, as individuals addressing these issues, you deserve such an incredible debt of gratitude, hand claps, and just lifting up, because you didn't stop, right? Advocates did not skip a beat. What we heard from advocates is regardless, we're going to figure out how to get folks internet. We're going to figure out how to provide support groups remotely. We're going to do the things that we do on a daily basis because there is need. And so what we saw from advocates is you didn't skip a beat, and that has to be lifted up. It has to be lifted up that you all really rose to the challenge, right? You really figured out how to do what needed to be done in that clutch moment. And so what does that mean for us when we think about what has now been a global pandemic, as well as conversations around racial justice, right? With the death of and murder of George Floyd, with the murder of Breonna Taylor, when we look at what has happened with Ahmaud Arbery, et cetera, there was and has been increased conversations around racial justice. And those are happening at the same time that we are talking about the impact of COVID. And particularly for many of us as advocates, it is so truly impactful because it is central to our work in addressing what has long been a system of oppression when we look at domestic violence and sexual assault, and particularly for the survivors that we serve. And so very often I'm asked, well, why is this, my work as a domestic violence organization or as a sexual assault organization? I want to focus in and address domestic violence. I don't have time to focus on all of those other things because we're not clear. How does that then impact the survivors that we serve? And so I want to talk about a couple of things that we say very often. When we talk about domestic violence, we use words like safety. When we talk about domestic violence, we say we believe survivors. We talk about justice. We have as a hallmark for our work, access to safety. We have a hallmark of our work, confidentiality. We have a hallmark of our work, how we will address systems and their impact on survivors, right? And acknowledging that if we truly believe that survivors have the ability and the right to access safety, then we have to also acknowledge that there are some survivors that are required to put a part of themselves on the shelf in order to access safety, right? That we require, particularly survivors of color, LGBTQ survivors, we require those survivors to almost separate a part of their reality in order to actually access safety. And in doing so, when we are requiring that of survivors, it means that they can never truly achieve justice, right? And so part of our work in looking at truly addressing wholly safety for all survivors is to also look at the ways in which systems impact their lives, right? That we can't ask communities for whom seeking law enforcement may or may not be safe. We can't allow that to be their only option. I don't necessarily suggest we take that option away, but I do say that it not be their only option, right? We can't say that when we know that children of color end up disproportionately showing up in the child welfare system, right? That those issues, the child welfare system may not be safe for those communities. Then we've got to look at how are those systems then impacting their lives, right? We have to ask survivors, what does safety look like for them? And then we've got to advocate based on what they say are their reality, right? So if I look at trafficking, for instance, and we see that 40% of trafficking survivors, trafficking victims in this country are Black women, then we've got to ask ourselves a question, right? Because the remedies around that very often are to look at law enforcement responses or to engage in systems that those survivors then don't necessarily feel are safe. And again, does that mean that we take away all of those options? not necessarily, but it looks at how do we make those options, number one, safer for survivors, but two, how do we expand the menu of options that are available for survivors, so that when individuals tell us that a particular system is not safe, they have another process for engaging in safe practices, right? And then we have to acknowledge that we've got work to do in our own field, right? We have to acknowledge that women of color tell us that they don't often feel safe coming into our programs. We've got to acknowledge that we have, when I look at frontline workers in domestic violence organizations, those people that were having to come to work every day, they were disproportionately women of color, right? And so we've got to look at the mobility within our own programs. Our women of color serving in positions where they get to impact policy, right? So when we're making laws or when we're influencing internal and external policies, that it's people of color having the ability to bring voice around how those policies then impact their communities. We've got to look at how we formulate and how we have access to funding, right? Are the funding streams that we are accessing supportive of our work? We've got to look at pay equity in our own organizations, access to healthcare for the individuals that work in our organizations, so that advocates that are out here advocating and rising to the moment, as all of you all are doing, to have access to safe and affordable housing, can afford safe healthcare, can go to the doctor, right? And that is also a part of achieving justice. If you have to sit across from a survivor and talk to them and plan with them about how they're going to access healthcare, but you don't have it yourself, that then becomes difficult, right? And so part of our advocacy has also got to be looking at how are we taking care of ourselves and how are we taking care of each other. And so when I talk about economic justice and economic advocacy, it's not only for survivors, it's for the advocates that are serving them, right? And that our programs, our organizations have to see this as key, as central to our work, that wellness can't only be about the external and about the them. Wellness has got to be about us too. And also when we think about communities of color, when we think about women of color, and when we think about the systems that we engage with, that we start to walk in boldness and we ask the hard questions, right? And as advocates, this is what we do, right? This is our moment. This is our time, because we are talking about addressing and putting people at the center. And that's what we do. We are in the people business. We are constantly approaching and looking at how do we keep people safe. And that's what this moment is about. When we look at talking about racial justice, it is ultimately about the economic safety, the social safety, the healthcare safety. Access to education is ultimately about safety for communities of color. And if we are to say that we believe survivors, then we have to believe communities that say we don't have access, right? And that has to become central to our work. And then finally, because I know time is of the essence, finally, what I want to end with is with, and I have this picture that I can't share, but it's about how we address our own biases. And I love to see this picture. It's a picture of Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg, and they're standing right next to each other, right? And there's this question of which one is the one that actually has been to prison,
right? Your co-host, you can share now.
Oh, okay. I will show it to you then. If you give me 1 minute, I will share my screen and I will bring it up. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll just bring up this picture. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay. So it's just a reminder that we have to be mindful about stereotypes because only one of these people is a convicted felon, right? And the importance of this statement, because very often we have to recognize that we have both implicit and explicit biases. And that when we look at this picture, we would automatically think that it's Snoop that's actually the convicted felon, and it's not. Right? And that's what we think about when we talk about safety. I'm going to stop sharing this. When we talk about safety, because one of the most important things we have to recognize is that for the survivors that we serve, if they can't assume that their children are safe, if they can't assume that their sons are safe, if they can't assure safety for their daughters, if they can't walk without fear, then figuring out how they're going to be in a safe relationship doesn't matter because their lives are not safe. I had one time this young man ask me, we do a program with youth in high schools, and particularly with boys who are on football teams. And one of the young men asked me, Ms. Cotman, how do you want me to talk about having a safe relationship when I can't walk to school safely? How do you want me to talk about a safe relationship when I don't have enough food to come to school without being hungry? How can I talk about a safe relationship here in school when I don't have access to books for school and I can't afford getting on the metro every day? And so the reality is we can't talk about safety here if we don't talk about safety there. And for many of women of color, their lives, they are living in unsafe places, homes. They don't have access to safe social services. They don't have access to economic remedies. And so true safety can't be achieved if we as advocates aren't working on that, right? True safety can't be achieved also, and I'm going to say this over and over again because it's so important right now, if you all aren't taking care of yourselves. You aren't any good. I love that idea of what it means to put your mask on first, and I always bucked against that because I'm like, if I'm sitting in a room and my mother or my sister or my niece needs a mask, I'm putting theirs on first, right? Until now, when you think about, we just really are no good if we can't be helpful. And so I'll just end with that. I'll end with recognizing that each one of you all is critically important in addressing domestic violence and addressing sexual assault, but particularly in making spaces safe for those people who are most marginalized, for women and children of color who need to address safety on a broader plane. And it is part of our responsibility to ensure that we are addressing that safety. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon to be with us and to be with the Maryland Network.
Can we just clap? Can we just unmute and clap just for a second?
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
It is so hard when we're in this virtual world to be able to show our thanks in a Zoom fashion. So thank you so much. I'm Jen Pollitt-Hill. I have the honor of serving as the network's interim executive director. And I want to add my welcome to Inga's. We're so glad that you have joined us today as we celebrate the amazing work of our colleagues. And definitely I want to thank Karma for sharing her wisdom and for reminding us of the work that still needs to be done to keep all survivors safe and create the world that we all want and deserve. So yay, Karma, thank you. Thank you for your time with us. We're going to shift gears just a little bit. We've kind of heard the charge from Karma of what has been done and what needs to be done in our future. But we want to shift and take some stock of the work that many of us have been doing to uplift survivors and to make their burdens a little lighter. So we're going to move into our awards section of our gathering today. Many of us have been part of this movement for many years. Some of us might be newer to the field, but regardless, we all know that this work at times can be all-consuming. You know, Carmen talked a little bit about having to put your mask on first, right? And it's important that we take time to step away from our daily work, honor the depth and the meaning of the work that we do together, and really re-energize ourselves so that we can continue to bring justice to our world. So in that vein, we now take some time to recognize our 2020 Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence awardees. So our first category is the Community Partners Award. And nominees for this award have a demonstrated track record as a community member of providing exceptional support to the domestic violence community and or directly to survivors of domestic violence. This year, we are happy to recognize Dr. Akita Pearson. Dr. Pearson has worked for more than 25 years to address the impact of intimate partner violence in our community, particularly in our faith communities. She has hosted a talk show. She's written a book. She's president of Howard County's Coalition to Prevent Intimate Partner Violence, among many other efforts. In so many ways, she works to bring a sense of urgency to this issue, to reduce silence that sometimes can surround this topic, and to influence and challenge stakeholders to be proactive in ending intimate partner violence. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pearson, for caring so deeply and for translating those feelings into decades of action. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing me. And we do not do this work alone. I have a lot of support and all the individuals that are even here. We work together, and it's just not a solo thing. You are my community. And so I appreciate this recognition. And it gives an opportunity to share how important the work is, but how much more the work is needed. So thank you for this honor.
Absolutely, thank you. Our second category is the Domestic Violence Advocate Award. And this award is exclusively for either a staff member or a volunteer or a board member that's affiliated with one of our local domestic violence programs. And it recognizes that the nominee for their outstanding efforts and contributions. It's for someone who really goes above and beyond their job duties to make a real difference in the lives of the survivors they serve. This year, our 2020 Domestic Violence Advocate Award goes to Amanda Ketchen-Farnett from the Crisis Intervention Center in Calvert County. Yay, Amanda! Amanda was nominated by her coworkers who recognize that she works tirelessly on behalf of victims. She serves as her county's lethality assessment project coordinator. She's a court liaison, helping survivors obtain peace and protective orders, and makes sure that every victim is treated with the kindness and respect that they deserve. Her colleagues say she's remarkable, not only for her robust work ethic, but also her deep compassion. And I always just think it's really special when it's your coworkers who want to honor you, because they know firsthand how hard the job actually is, and they know what your heart looks like when nobody's looking. So congratulations, Amanda, and thank you for all that you do. Do you want to say a few words? You know, I'm not sure, maybe Amanda isn't with us actually.
I'm not sure she's with us. She may be traveling.
I believe it was her wedding anniversary.
Oh, well, excellent. We do not want to get in the way of love. Absolutely, absolutely. So when we talk about self-care, that is getting your priorities right. So congratulations to Amanda, even in absentia. I also want to take a moment and spotlight Susan Shore, who is the current board president of the Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse. Susan has served on the board of Chiquita for 5 years and is in her 3rd year as board president. Susan is our domestic violence program honoree. Thank you, Susan, for your leadership. It's so needed.
Thank you for this award. I have such respect for all of you who are really on the front lines of all this work and how you've just continued without skipping a beat. And it's so impressive, and it means, I know how much it means to the clients that you all serve. So thank you.
Wonderful. Our third award category is the David M. Sargent Lethality Assessment Program Award. And to tell you a little bit more about this award and to announce our current year recipient, I'd like to turn things over to Darrell Holly. He serves as the network's Lethality Assessment Program Administrator. Darrell, you want to take it from here?
Yes, thank you, Jen. Just to give you kind of idea what this award is, the David M. Sargent Lethality Assessment Program Award was created in recognition of David Sargent for his contribution in his role as the founding father of the Lethality Assessment Program. The LAP Award recognizes professionals who are doing exceptional work in homicide reduction through the vehicle of the LAP. Professionals who receive this award have been chosen for their exemplary dedication to the coordination and implementation of the LAP. They have gone above and beyond to develop LAP best practices within their agencies. And I'm proud to acknowledge this year's David M. Sargent Lethality Assessment Program Award to Morgan Abbott. Morgan has been dedicated and diligent and shows a desire to ensure the sustainability of the LAP program in Virginia. Morgan utilizes our multiple counties within Virginia by hosting meetings, conducting LAP trainings, providing technical assistance, encouraging all to utilize this life-saving program. Morgan strives to have all communities within Virginia to become LAP implementers, ensure the integrity of the program. So the 2020 Lethality Assessment Award winner is Morgan Abbott. Morgan, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited and honored to even be considered for this award. I've been working with Darrell for a year now since I was brought on. But I am totally love LAP. I had a lot of experience with it in my previous career as law enforcement, and then saw firsthand the effectiveness of the lethality assessment program, working with survivors of intimate partner violence, and then to be given the opportunity to work with the Virginia Attorney General Mark Herring, and the opportunity to continue implementing it throughout the state has been really exciting. This is something that Mark Herring has been pushing and been very supportive of since his time in the Senate, Virginia Senate. And it's just been really great to be part of this team. We partner in Virginia with the Department of Criminal Justice Services and our state domestic violence coalition, the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance. So I'm just honored to be part of that dynamic team, promoting lethality assessment statewide, providing that training and such. Over the past, we've had it for 5 years. So we have 49 law enforcement agencies on board, 23 domestic violence programs that have partnered with us to implement it in their community. We're not done yet. We're excited. So I'm just excited to be accepting this award on behalf of all of Virginia LAP communities, and know that, that the proper intervention, IPV homicide, is preventable. And I'm very proud to be part of the solution of Virginia's LAP coordinator. So thank you so much.
Welcome and thank you. We're so happy to have you, Morgan, and thank you for all that you do. So next we move on to what we call our Leadership Award. And the Leadership Award is designed to highlight a person who has a track record of success in leading statewide, regional, or community-based advocacy efforts that really aim to improve the response to domestic violence and work towards the elimination of domestic violence. We've got so many people who have made notable contributions in our field. And so given that we have such a rich pool to pull from, I'm very happy to present the 2020 Leadership Award to Angelique Green Manning from the House of Ruth, Maryland. Angelique represents the best of who we are. She began her work at House of Ruth, Maryland in 2003 as a legal advocate, and then rose to supervising advocates, and then moved to be the manager of the Abuse Intervention Services. In this role, she's led the expansion of the program to be a National Institute for Justice studied model for intervention, and served as the co-chair of the Maryland Abuse Intervention Collaborative, where she helped to spearhead work to identify new funding opportunities for programs and efforts to coordinate statewide outcomes. So Angelique's done it all from beginning to end. And so today she serves as the Associate Director of Intervention Services at House of Ruth, Maryland, and really is a model of enduring grace and dignity in this work. Many, many thanks, Angelique, for being exactly who you are and leading by example in this field. Congratulations. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am truly honored to have been nominated and then to have been chosen to receive this award. I want to acknowledge Dorothy Lennick, who is the reason I am employed at House of Ruth, and Lisa Nitch, who's the reason I'm still here. You women are the bomb. I'm not sure if people still say that, but I do. I've been employed by House of Ruth for 18 years, and I worked in the legal clinic for 11 years of that time. And for the rest of the time, I've been here in the abuse intervention program. I loved working in the legal clinic, providing information and support to survivors. But after a while, I felt a little burnt out. And I thought it was time to leave. I needed a change. And I never imagined that that change would be 2 floors down to manage the abuse intervention program. That was Lisa Nitch's idea, by the way. That move revitalized me, gave me energy. I learned new skills, and I got to see the work of the agency from a different perspective. Still advocating for survivors, still working to make families safer, just doing it from a different point. You know, I was working from the source, working with the abusive partners. I could see how the agency worked as a team to improve lives, the lives of the survivor, making them safer, and the lives of the abusive partner, getting them employed, connecting them to mental health and substance abuse treatment, and of course, giving them the tools to change their unhealthy behaviors. That move really benefited me in that I was able to continue to work for an agency I admire. I knew very well and enjoyed the work, enjoyed working there. And I believe the agency benefited. After all, they had me. And I'm still here working every day with my fabulous staff, supporting the House of Ruth mission and focused on the vision that one day every woman in Maryland would be safe in her home. So if you're feeling burned out, let your supervisor know. Talk to HR. Your change could be just down the hall or on another floor. I'm grateful and I feel blessed that it worked out for me. I'm proud to be a part of this community of people committed to making a difference and to making our community safer. I know this work is hard. It's demanding, and sometimes it's just downright exhausting, but it's necessary. It requires special people like y'all. We're humans doing superhuman work. We have to give of ourselves, be kind, be professional, be empathetic and respectful, even when we don't feel like it. Especially with everything that's going on, things are compounded, more complicated, more stressful. I want to encourage you. Be kind to yourself. Take care of each other. Remember those moments that make the work worthwhile. You're a vital part of this community. The work you do makes a difference, and together we are changing lives. Shout out to my fabulous staff and to my family, many of whom are on this Zoom. Thank y'all. My husband, Lawrence, and my children, Imani and Chavez. I love y'all. And take good care of yourself.
Man, Angelique, you just kind of underscored why you got the leadership award. Nobody could say it better. That was amazing. Thank you so much for all that you do. And really, we weren't kidding when we said lead by example. So thank you very much for those words.
Thank you.
So we're zooming through this, no pun intended, really. Our final award is our Outstanding Achievement Award. This award recognizes a person's dedication to ending domestic violence and a track record of outstanding achievement in advocacy, organizing, or tireless service to really change the landscape of domestic violence related systems in Maryland. So with that, we really want to honor Jill Larson of the Betty Ann Kroenke Center from Montgomery County. As the program director of Montgomery County's domestic violence shelter, Jill works tirelessly to provide excellent service to all residents who come through the doors. Particularly during COVID, she has remained on the front lines, supporting both staff and residents to ensure safety in the facility. She's used her passion and creativity and innovation to assist clients who are seeking shelter during the pandemic. Jill works in collaboration with the Montgomery County Crisis Center, Abused Persons Program, as well as the Family Justice Center to assist survivors of both DV and human trafficking. And while many have transitioned to working remotely during the pandemic, Jill has selflessly and voluntarily chosen to continue to come into the shelter daily to make sure that operations are running smoothly and that staff morale is maintained. And all of us know during this time how much that takes to keep us motivated and keep our morale up as we have been playing cards that we never knew we were going to get dealt. And Jill, really, it's your dedication and your willingness to put yourself on the front line for others as to why we want to honor you with the 2020 Outstanding Achievement Award. Congratulations, Jill.
Well, thank you. I am so honored and humbled by this because I wouldn't have thought, you know, for a minute of staying home and how important it is for us to be there when the women need us and the children need us and our staff, you know, as a leader. And I couldn't do it without my team. You know, we really have fabulous staff here. Everybody is caring and compassionate to help the women and so experienced in this field. And just every day they came in, there was not a moment where we said, what are we going to do? It was, okay, we've got to think ahead and we've got to get moving on this. And we've got individuals here. This is going to be a pinnacle time. And we know that things have been very difficult for people at home. And, you know, I really resonate with the message that Karma had sent to us. We see it here, our team feels it. We are all working together to really make sure that we are safe. And that is our number one thing. And we want women to be safe. We want women to thrive. We want children to thrive. And we want to end this domestic violence. And we want to get through the pandemic together to be a stronger together. And so I just want to thank, you know, for the nomination from Erica Leonard. It was fantastic. She is a fantastic clinician as well. And to all my staff, my clinicians there, Aisha Edwards and Lily Dahlgren and Brandon Calhoun, one of our residential supervisors, and all of our residential staff here coming in, you know, tirelessly doing this job, and just positive, just, you know, it's wonderful. And so thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. You know, it is so odd for us to be together like this. We would so much rather be in person so we could hug each other. Do you remember what that's like to see colleagues that you love and you've worked with for years? You know, much like Angelique mentioned, you know, we all have to reinvent ourselves sometimes when we are committed to this field for a long, you know, for the long haul. And so many of us have crossed paths and recrossed paths, and it would have been lovely to be all together. And that will have to be for another time. But I'm reinvigorated just to see people's faces, just to hear your comments in the chat. And really, I want to underscore the together part, even though we're Zoom together, right? We've heard from Karma about the challenges that we face, really the demand for racial justice and how it is inextricably linked to our work of ending DV, that these go hand in hand. And we have stepped up for that, and we have more work to do. And the pandemic and its impact on survivors, and how, much like Jill's example, many of us didn't even bat an eye. This is what we do. We are crisis response people. We get in there, we roll up the sleeves, we make sure that people are as safe as we can possibly do. But the message, it wasn't just about challenges. It's about how we have stepped up and how we do this work together. And we've taken time to honor what people have done to contribute significantly to creating the change that we need to see in the world. We all, on a very rainy day, hopefully still with pajama bottoms on, because you might still be in pajama bottoms right now, decided to spend an hour with a group of people to honor these amazing women who have really exemplified the best of who we are. You know, really together, we are the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, and we are only as strong as the contributions that we make to the field. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to thank our sponsors, especially the YWCA of Anne Arundel County and Annapolis as our platinum sponsor. And I also want to highlight that Delegate Sandy Bartlett issued a Maryland General Assembly citation, also in honor of all our awardees. So even though there's a group of us on this call, certainly the impact that each honoree has made on the field is noticed in a much wider range than just this call today. And most of all, I just want to thank each and every one of you for what you have contributed to the field, the passion that you bring to the field, and all that is to come and what we'll do together. So thank you so much for spending a little time with us. We'll get you out a few minutes early, and you can have a proper happy hour cocktail to celebrate. So thank you again, and have a great evening. Okay, so that's the end.
Wonderful seeing all of you. Congratulations.
Always good to see you, Rosemary.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
Jen, you're such a natural host. Jen, you're such a natural. I said you're such a natural host.
We talked about that yesterday. Why that is.
So good.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And Jen, this is Sharon O'Brien. It's so nice. Hi.
Too long. It's so nice to see you.
It's nice to see you. I imagine your kids are in their 20s now.
Oh my goodness, not quite, but my oldest is 16 and driving, so that's a little freaky.
Okay, I remember when they were born. Yeah, you did a great job. I'll have to figure out how to stay connected with Maryland Network. I'm so glad that I got the email. It's
good. You know, Sharon, I'm going to put my email in the chat,
Okay.
and just give me a quick email back so I have your contact information, and we'll make sure that you kind of get on our listservs. And you know, when the world goes back right side up, maybe we can actually have lunch.
Yes, that would be nice.
You know, that would be great. Yeah, catch up. That would be wonderful.
Good. We do this national ministry now, so it's hard to balance both. But yeah, great. Good. Yeah, I'll put it in here.
Miss Bernadette, are you honoring? Are you attached to Angelique?
Yes, I'm her mother.
Nice.
Oh, her proud
Mommies
mother.
are so proud.
Oh, that's so awesome.
So glad you could get on and see. I mean, I know you know how wonderful she is, but it's nice to see that everybody else knows how wonderful she is.
Exactly.
And that speech solidified it.
No kidding.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
For sure.
Yes.
Dad was on here, but I think he's gone.
She was on point though. She really was. She really, really was.
Yeah, Karma, let's see, Karma, she was great. I actually, I missed the fact that that National Resource Center had been created in 2016. And they're like, I don't know, there are like 8 of them now or something.
Yes, they're all sort of very population specific so that people can get some deep technical assistance.
Right. Yeah. So it's great that that it's local.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. She's such a resource. You know, she's been at the National Network to End Domestic Violence for a long time, and with the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and then the DC Coalition started Ujima, and so she's transitioning from the DV Coalition to lead Ujima. So
Okay.
benefit from her expertise.
Yeah, she was great. So yeah, the best to everybody. And yeah, we'll stay in touch.
Right.
Okay, thanks.